Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I think most of you will know Michael, and some of you will, some may be not. He's going to be talking to us about governance today. So thank you very much for your time. I know you're super busy at the moment. I don't know if you guys can see the Q&A. It should be working. If not, just use the raise hand tab if you've got any questions or anything you'd like to comment on. But over to you, Michael. Thanks again.
Yeah, the point is the Q&A works on your machine, right? Not on mine.
I can't answer your question, sorry.
Oh, well, you have to know. I will help you. We'll get through this together.
That could get interesting.
All right. Should we start straight away or do we wait for a couple of minutes? I don't know. Your show.
Yeah, no, I think we can start on time. If people will join late, they always do. So I'll keep an eye on that.
All right.
And then you
can
take off.
Then I will start. Yeah, welcome everybody, and thanks Sarah for having me. So this is me talking about Power Platform governance, the bare minimum, and this is going to be an overview session. And the problem with that topic is actually that for each part that we are talking about, we could easily do a single session. So it's easy to get distracted within that. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A. If it's working on your machine, then Sarah has to answer. I would love to see that. If not, you can raise your hand maybe in the end of the session when we're done. Then you can always ping me on social media and ask kind of questions. Okay, I will start with a quick introduction. If we haven't met yet, I'm Michael. Nice to meet you. I'm a BizOps MVP for, let me check, 2 years now, 2.5 years. And I work as a manager of experience tech at Avanade, which is honestly the best job title that I ever had because nobody has a clue what I'm doing. This is awesome. I just manage your experience of tech, whatever that means to you. So a lot of times I can make stuff up that I do for a living, which I really like. So, but mainly I work as a Power Platform consultant and as a solution architect. And I'm in the very lucky position that I can work with the most fun and exciting topics around Power Platform there is. And since you are here with me, I think we can agree that this is Power Platform governance and administration. Yay, so much fun. I work part-time as a graphic designer, so if one of you needs a cool logo or some icon, let's chat. And please don't be distracted if I sometimes look over this side of the camera and this side of the camera. Here's the presentation over there. There are you guys. So yeah, that's it. Okay, we have a lot to uncover in this session. So here's a quick agenda. And I would like to briefly talk about the most important things. Once again, Power Platform bare minimum. Those are those areas that you should look into or check if that is enabled or not. I'm going to talk about tenant settings, then DLPs, of course, environments, roles, and permissions. A quick overview about what methods you have for monitoring. And then we have to treat our special default environment with a little bit of extra care. And then we have a very forbidden topic at the very end, which is going to be very exciting. And it's my favorite topic, so I spare it for the last topic. And then I do have some recommendations and a little bit of aftermath and summary and some links and QR codes to scan for documentation and stuff. So yeah, if you make it to the end, then you can scan those and ask questions. All right. I will dive straight into it and start with tenant settings. And we're talking about the disable the self-service. If you don't know what the self-service for Power Platform is, this is actually a kind of, let's say, cool feature from a Microsoft perspective. And user can purchase their own Power Platform license online and use them in their organization without consulting the IT department or an admin, which is great for a user. But this is literally something like a shut up and take my money moment. If the IT doesn't provide the user any licenses, they can just go buy their own and use it in your organizational account, and there's hardly anything you can do about it. And that's basically how you create shadow IT, even within the Power Platform. So I would just like to show you how to detect and disable it. And for that, we are going to jump over to the M365 Admin Center, not the Power Platform Admin Center. And it took me a while to figure that out, actually, but there within the billing and your products group, I hope you can see that, and that's not too small. all over the right side here, you got those 5 filters pre-selected by default if you just open the Your Product section. And all down here, you got self-service. And if you enable this filter, you can see all the licenses that were bought with a self-serving purchase option. It gives you not really the name of the user who's using it, but you can see if there are any. And if you really decide to disable this feature, which I did with every tenant I worked with so far, then you can expect a few users to get confused because their license don't work anymore. So you can at least measure a little bit the amount of additional follow-up work that you have to do that if you disable the self-service purchase option. To see that, you need to one of the 3 roles, the global admin role, the global reader, or the billing admin administrator role, just to see that. But that's actually a very handy thing that I do with each and every one of my customers. And most of the time, we find a few of those self-service licenses, which I think is really interesting. But yeah, there is a quick and easy way to disable that, and that is with PowerShell. And I know most Power Platform administrators I know are not that familiar with PowerShell, so I created a quick walkthrough how that works. So we need the PowerShell module MS Commerce. This is hosted in the PowerShell gallery. So if you just Google it, you will find it rather quickly, actually. And then we use this commandlet install module -name / MS Commerce. And then we get this message here. This is an untrusted repository. You are installing the module, and it sounds a little bit scary, but this is just actually the notification that this module is not hosted in your own environment, but it comes from Microsoft. So this is a perfectly safe one. After we did that, we first need to connect to MS Commerce. And then we are asked to put our credentials in. So when we do that, then the module is ready to go. And we can first start with this commandlet, and I put those commandlets in the slides here. So if you want the slides afterwards, you can just copy paste those in and put in the right values that you need. With this commandlet, we will get all the products that allow self-service purchase. And during an in-person session, that is the point where I ask how many projects do you think there are, or how many products there are that allow self-service purchase, because I was kind of surprised. There are a lot. And for all those products, the users can buy their own license without you recognizing it and start using that. They have to pay off on their own, of course, but still they can do that. And as an administrator, I really like to know what's going on in my tenant. And so I like to shut those off. And the first possibility to shut this off I found is this command with the MS Commerce module. This actually, we update the product policy of this module, put in a policy ID that would be the value that is required in there. And then we go for the action allow self-service product purchase product ID. Here comes the product ID, and then we set the value to disabled. The CFQ7TTC0H9MP, I think you're all familiar with that. I guess now I don't see your reaction. That's actually something point with those online sessions. This is, of course, Power BI Pro. We can see that. And the problem, what we have with this commandlet is that we would have to put in every product ID by hand for all of those products that we have. And that is like a tedious task. That is why you can use this commandlet, this whole one, where we basically set a variable here and type in the name Power BI Pro. If you can't remember all the product ID by heart, I have that sometimes as well, that they just slip my mind. We can just type that in here, Power BI Pro, Power Automate, Viva, whatever we have, whatever we want to disable. So that works as well. If you copy paste that whole commandlet out and just added this part here for the product you want to disable, that works as well. If you want to disable all product at once, of course, there's another snippet here that you can use. And this works quite fine, actually, and shuts off all the products, all the sales service options for all those products at once. And honestly, most of my customers, no, all of my customers did that because they want to be in charge what kind of processes or products their user are using in their organizational tenant. And that was the most technical and for some people most scary part of the whole presentation. So congrats, we done that. Now let's move on to tenant isolation. And this is another one that is getting more and more popular lately. What this is basically, user can create a connection, for example, in a flow, from the personal account to an organizational account when they have the correct credentials. And for most organizations I've visited, actually, there are a lot of guest accounts that have credentials for the organizational account, like a consultant, for example, that you would give a guest account, they have access, and they can create a connection from their own tenant. And this way, organizational data can be retrieved without touching the organizational account at all. So I do have a little example to make it a little bit more clear what that is. We have on the left-hand side here a very suspicious looking dude with blue hair gambling around on his own tenant. So this is no organizational tenant at all. This is just my own one. And I got this flow that when a file is created, I receive the file content and create an item on a SharePoint in my own tenant. Now, on the other hand, oh no, here, my connections. So this is just to demonstrate this is my own tenant. But I can add a new connection here, and this is the important part. If I would have credentials from some other tenant, then I could create another connection and would say, when a file is created on a different tenant, get the file content and store this on my own SharePoint in my tenant. And I did this with this very handsome looking young man working at Avanade. I have those credentials, coincidentally, and this is my Avanade OneDrive. So this flow basically works now when I create a file here, I get a copy in my SharePoint on my own tenant, and this is a cross-tenant connection. And I even got fancy arrows. So this is this at first sounds a little bit scary, and basically most of my customers have a lot of cross-tenant connections in their tenant, because usually, I think a couple of months ago, if you wanted to switch on tenant isolation, you needed to raise a support ticket from Microsoft, and they did it in the back end, and you had no control over it at all. But now we can do it ourselves, and this is kind of interesting. So let's have a look at how to disable that. For that, we are hopping over to the Power Platform Admin Center. And there is this fancy new little thing, tenant isolation. Still in preview, but still works great. This is switched off per default. So if you open that for the first time, it should be switched off. If it's switched on, somebody switched it on, which is a good thing. And what you can do here is you can create tenant rules. And that means basically sometimes you need cross-tenant connections. If you would use Adobe Sign, for example, then there would be a connection from your tenant to the Adobe Sign web service and back. So every time we use a third-party application, for example, on the tenant level, there's created a connection. So quite often it's not enough to just switch it on, because most of the stuff will stop working then, but we can create new tenant rules to allow certain connections or to deny certain connections. And this one is very important, because those cross-tenant connections are not caught by any data loss prevention policy or anything else. This is happening in the background. And I think in my resource material, I have a very good blog from a fellow MVP from France who explained it on a very technical, detailed level. But this is more or less the only thing you can do to deactivate or be safe from cross-tenant connections without you realizing it. And I had a story where I tested that on a tenant together with Chris Huntingford, and he did this. Let's say on a tenant that we didn't own, and we tried it together and received, I think, a couple of SharePoint lists then with the promotion notes from next managers and group managers and stuff. That was really interesting. We didn't have any access to the tenant, just our own credentials from a consultant job we did. And then we received a lot of information, basically for free, and no admin could ever just detect that. That was a little bit scary. And that's why when we figured out what cross-tenant isolation actually is. Yeah, so if you haven't checked that out, click to policies, then tenant isolation and preview, switch it on. This is really, really, really important. If it's not switched on, you can use the Center of Excellence starter kit to get an idea how many cross-tenant connections you have, because this is documented there. Really handy, really good. check out the tenant isolation feature. Next one is an interesting one. This is data loss prevention policies. And really everyone needs a tenant-wide DLP. Because there is this fancy little thing called the community plan, and I guess you've heard of that, I hope. If you sign up for the community plan, you get a free developer environment, basically, in your tenant, which is nice. And earlier this year, Microsoft even announced that you'd only get one, but 3 environments, which brought us this amazing picture of Phil here, which I really like. The point is now, if I have 100 users in my organization, and they all get 3 new environments for free, then I got 300 environments, and that can easily eat up my capacity. And I'm not sure if those developer environments from the community plan are even covered in my data loss prevention policy. And this is the tricky part here. So if we check the data policy part here, the point is, as soon as one data loss prevention policy is tenant-wide, all new environments will automatically be covered by this data loss prevention policy. This is very, very important. So if you click on if you are in the admin center and select policies, data policies, new policy, then you will get sooner or later to this little pop-up. And there you have the scope where you can define it. And with this add all environments, there's a little information that the entire organization, this policy will automatically apply to any new environment that is created, which is really nice. Actually, but the same thing applies if you add multiple environments or exclude certain environments. So if you have a very restrict data tenant-wide DLP, then it can be difficult if you have a new environment where you need another connector that is usually would be blocked. Then you have to single-handedly and manually exclude that environment. So best practice is actually to create one dummy environment just for testing, and then use the second opinion here, like add multiple environments. That one of the first 2 options basically makes sure that all your environments and all your newly created environments are covered by the same DLP that you have like for default for your standard. And that is really important as well, because otherwise you will get environments that are not covered by any DLP, and you really don't want that. Another nice little setting, if we're talking about data loss prevention, is the set default group in the upper right corner. I hope you've seen that, because what do we have on connectors now? I think 1043 or something like that. So basically there are new connectors published every week or every other week. And I've seen many admins now who have a task on their weekly task list. Every Friday they would check newly published connectors, check if they are okay to use or not, and where to put them in their DLP, in their business or non-business or block group. And what I usually do is, in this little settings here, you can set the default group. That means every newly published connector will automatically be categorized in business, non-business, or blocked. And if you don't want to get any nasty surprises, just select blocked so that every new connector will be blocked automatically. Then you can have maybe a weekly task to check out the new ones, to check if they are okay, if you can use it for that business or not, and then you can still decide whether to put them in business and non-business. But the set default group setting is a really valuable one that saved me a lot of time and actually a few unliked surprises. So there were 2 things about data loss prevention policies. Environments. And this is something that really surprises me, because on the one hand, I work with governance and administration each and every day. So for me, it's quite normal to know what environments are, but I see many, many customers who have no really a clue what this is, how it works. But I always say environments are like a space to store and manage data, apps, flows, tables, everything that you need for some Power Platform solution. And they're basically big boxes. And you can use them, for example, for your default environment, and then another one for HR, another one for finance, another one for IT, for those business areas, which makes quite sense, because sometimes people from different business units are allowed to see different data. I know people from HR that are allowed to look at certain data and records, and people from finance are not. And it makes sense to separate them from each other and just don't. So that is an easy way to manage actually your data in your tenant. Another possibility would be if you would separate your data by country. Because once again, here, the rules and regulations and laws actually in Spain are different from that in North America. And so it would really make sense to separate your data from each other so that you can apply different law sets and rules and regulations on those environments. And the third really common use case is for use them for development. If you have a development environment, testing and production environment, this is basically application lifecycle management, or short ALM. That really helps you to develop a, let's say, important app and test it, so you don't have to develop or test it in production, which could cause any errors and troubles, and really it gives you a hard time. So environments are basically a good idea to separate data units or stages of applications. And I often get the question, what is a good good environment strategy? And since I'm a good consultant, I have to say it depends. But luckily, Microsoft published, there's one of the few cases Microsoft published something like opinionated guidance and gave us an idea how it can look. And this is the North Star architecture for Power Platform. And I think it just got rebranded and renamed because Microsoft loves to do that. It's not North Star anymore, it's now the reference architecture and landing zones for Power Platform. And since this can be a lot, there's a lot going on this picture. So I usually start at a different point and I start there. I have my tenant. We all have the default environment and we never ever get rid of that. Usually I start with an administrator environment. So where I set up the COE kit and I set up all my flows that I need for housekeeping and keeping my tenant clean. That's where I start. And if I have those two environments and I have my data loss prevention policies assigned, I have role assignments for my users so that everyone can just see the environments they're supposed to see. From there, I build up the first industry or country or business area, whatever I have, those structure that I have. And I will then assign another policy, a data loss prevention policy as well. I check the role assignments, so security roles, so that just those users that are supposed to see this environment have access to this environment. Yeah, and from there, it can slowly be built up and can slowly grow until you have the full picture. If you really want an ALM process, you can use the DevOps or the Git repositories for that. Think always about managed solution or unmanaged solutions. So I think the only way a solution should be deployed to any productive environment should be managed, but this is just my personal opinion. But this is the message here is basically it's totally okay if your environment strategy right now doesn't look like this, but more like this. It's okay that it can grow by time, because what I've seen a lot with customers now is that Microsoft has this this message. It's low code, it's super easy, everyone can do it. So most of my customers did that. They tried it out, and now they have a mess of apps and environments and flows, and everything is like a wild bunch. So hardly any customer's environment strategy right now looks like this, or maybe if they do, then just on paper. But it's okay to only get there with time. What's very important about environments and the strategy are those role assignments or security roles, because roles and permissions are really a cool way to manage like your users and to reach all users of a certain group. What I usually do is I create groups, and that can be any kind of group that we have, like an M365 group, security group, or whatever. I have those here, and I think those are full-fledged M365 groups. I usually do that because then this group, those groups, as you know, they get a SharePoint site, communication site, they get a Teams channel, they get a shared OneNote and stuff. I use that quite a lot. And I usually make sure that my groups that I use are mail enabled, because I have those groups for different personas that I use. The Power Platform user, they don't develop any apps or flows, they just use what we have developed. Then we have the maker, citizen developer, they make stuff. And then those are the admins here. And in case I need to reach all those people from this group, when they are mail enabled, I can send them a mail. When they are M365 group, they have the common team space. I can just ping them with Teams, and that's what I really like about M365 groups, to use those as security groups on environments. And that is what I use them for. You can set up a security group for a different environment, and this way only people that are member of that security group can access the environment. And that makes it really, really easy to manage who's allowed to which environment, and you don't need to manage the access on environment or user level, but by the group level. Similar to SharePoint, actually. And this is really, really handy. So I have my 4 environments and I have 4 different security groups. So only people from the purple security group are allowed to even see this environment, and they can't see and access all those others. Because per default, if you just assign a license to a user and this M365 license that has some kind of Power Platform in it, they can see all the environments that are not protected by security groups at once. And that's usually what I would like to not have my users experience, because then they're usually overwhelmed and don't know where to click, and for sure they choose the wrong environment to do something. So security groups and environments, best friends, go hand in hand. If you go to your Power Platform Admin Center and you see in the menu environments, then you can see here in the details that there's no security group assigned. Select edit, and if you scroll down a bit, or if your screen is large enough, you can see the security group, and you can edit those, and then you can see those are the similar groups that I was showing you earlier in the M365 Admin Center. And I can just choose one of those security groups, and then this environment can only be accessed by members of this security group. Pretty good feature. All right, let's check the time. Okay. Monitoring. Right now, we have several ways to monitor the Power Platform and what's going on, and I just have a few, not all of them. Usage Analytics is the report in the Power Platform Admin Center. And even when you enable the tenant analytics, then you get a per environment and a per tenant wide view, which is really handy. And this was really shitty a couple of months ago. But the PowerCat team and Microsoft, they are putting a lot of effort into the admin center and into the whole governance story. So they got quite good actually recently, and we will have a look later on. This is a very good start to monitor Power Platform usage. Then we got the audit logs that are like really detailed log reports from the Microsoft Purview compliance portal. It's pretty cool. If you have the right administrational rights, you can set it up as well, and you can see them also in the Center of Excellence Starter Kit if you need to, or get them from the Purview portal. Those are really detailed, but before you use them, you really need to set up all the details, what you're looking for, what you want to log, stuff like that, but those are really cool. Then, of course, the Center of Excellence Starter Kit itself. If you haven't heard about it, that's a third-party tool built on Power Platform by Microsoft, published by the PowerCat team on GitHub. So if you ask Microsoft, this is kind of third-party. That's why they host it only on GitHub and don't sell it as an actual tool, and that's why they don't provide any support for that. But the PowerCat team has a support channel on GitHub, and actually, usually they're reacting way faster than Microsoft itself. So there is kind of support for that, and it really works great. And actually, for me, this is like the foundation for any governance project that I start. And every tenant I put on the COE Starter Kit to see what's going on. You can see, and that's usually the situation when I ask a customer, do you have, I don't know, Power Pages in place? They said, nope, we haven't even enabled those. There are none. Then we hook up the Center of Excellence Starter Kit and we found just 200 of them. And they're like, oopsie. So this is really interesting. And this happens nearly all the time. And the last part, it's not the last way to monitor the Power Platform, but it's one I have to mention by now. Those are the managed environments. And this is a premium feature now, which is getting more and more attention, but I will come to that later. All right, start with the usage analytics. I will show you the usage analytics and the managed environments, because in the time that we have, I think more is not really possible. So let's start with the usage analytics. And those are in the Power Platform Admin Center as well, on the button Analytics. And then you have the one for Dataverse, Usage, Power Automate, Power Apps, and you can export your data. Yeah, I provided screenshots here because if the internet is not stable, I don't trust the demo. So, but this one is nice. What we can see now here is I have the environment level analytics. I have my default environment here, and I can see it for the last 28 days. This is basically just an embedded Power BI report that can show me all my runs. I can see also the usage, when Power Automate flows were created, which of them have errors, which are shared, and which connectors. So I can filter basically by a lot of stuff. And I do have a view for that, I guess. Let me see. Nope, that are my fancy frames. Maybe we can have a look at that after that. I think I have another screenshot of that. Anyway, this one is a little bit outdated. I just wanted to show you that I have the environment level analytics right now. And if you click on that button, you can click on tenant level analytics if you have set up this functionality in the settings. But the button is somewhere else now. And I've just seen that a couple of days ago, I think beginning of the week. Maybe we can have a look in the admin center live later on. Then we can see where the button is. But here I had this is the tenant level analytic, and this is kind of new, just a couple of months, where you can see the usage of Power Automate through the whole tenant, like the total flows and total runs of the flows, successful runs. This is pretty similar to the Center of Excellence Starter Kit information. That gives you a really good insight if you don't have time or you really don't want to install and deploy the Center of Excellence Starter Kit. This is a good thing. And you even can set up let me check. Nope. There's a maker activity as well. This is really handy if you want to scale or push the usage of Power Platform a bit and to see which areas are working well and which environments don't work well as all, and where you have your most active users. So this is really nice. And of course, you got the inventory where you can see everything that's going on in your tenant. A little bit like the COE, very cool. And the cool thing is, this is a Power BI report. You can export this data as a CSV file, for example. And if you have, I think at least everyone I know has one of those managers who still really likes the good old Excel report. So this is possible as well. Yeah. To get the tenant level analytics, maybe that is interesting how to set it up. If you can click on settings, right-hand corner, and here now, I've seen this as well. There are two ways to access the settings now. You get the Power Platform settings, and there's this one bar here, analytics, enable tenant level analytics. If you switch that on, you have the possibility to see the tenant level analytics, which is really handy. Yeah, and I think somewhere in the admin center, we can see how to switch it on, how to change the view. I will do that right now because otherwise I will forget. Let's check. I do have the admin center open somewhere here in a different. Yeah. Can you see the admin center now, or still seeing the presentation? Admin center. Good. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So the button that I showed over here is now gone. We have an environment view here where I can see my different environments and change those filters for my environments that I have and the time period. You only get the last 28 days. This is maybe important to know. Or the overview that provides the tenant-wide usage. And of course, this works for Power Apps as well. Yeah, so this is a really good starting point actually to start monitoring if you don't have anything else at hand. This got really good in the recent months. All right. The other thing I want to show you are the managed environments, because there are usually a couple of questions around those. What are managed environments? So in the admin center, when we choose the environments, we can select one environment and then hit the ellipsis and enable managed environments. That's how we set an environment to manage. And what happens then is you get a bunch of features enabled. First, you get usage insight, and that is everything that happens in this environment. You get a digest weekly per email that looks nice. How many new apps, how many new flows, how many runs, how many error runs, basically all the information for an environment that you want to have. You will get that automated in your inbox once per week. This looks nice. It's kind of handy, but I was a little bit surprised that this is a new feature, because you could build this with a COE yourself. It's like a 10-minute build flow or something. It's not rocket science. But anyway, you get this. Then you get the limit sharing opportunity, where you can say, I want to set limits if users are sharing apps with more than, let's say, you can set a limit here, like with 5 people, with 10 people, with 20 people, or you can additionally exclude sharing with security groups altogether. The idea behind that is, if, for example, you have an environment and an app is suddenly shared with 250 users, that sounds like a business critical or important app. And then I would like, as an administrator, I would like to have a backup, and I would know that there's some documentation. If the owner gets sick or leaves the company or something like this, I want to make sure to have that. So I usually don't limit the sharing possibility, but I set a reminder for myself, not with this feature, but with the Center of Excellence, because the Center of Excellence holds just the data that you need to build that yourself. I set an alarm for myself. If my app gets like shared with more than 20 or 30 people, I reach out to the maker and ask them if they can provide me a backup, proper documentation, what kind of app is that, and stuff like that. Then maybe even I want to promote that app in different environments or for the whole company. So this is kind of handy, and out of the box feature is always nice. No additional work. Then we have the maker welcome content, which is still in preview. And this is basically the first time the maker goes to make.powerapps.com or make.powerautomate.com, they will get a pop-up that you can design with Markdown, and where you can describe how the governance or how the Power Platform is used in your organization. You can provide links for documentation if you have something like this, and basically direct your maker or citizen developer to the right points in your tenant, what they need to know, what they need to check out. So this is nice. Yeah, this is nice. And we got the solution checker, which is still in preview. But this is also a nice feature. Every time a maker or yourself, you would import a solution from the dangers of the internet outside there, you can have this checker and you can put it to a warning or block. Block would mean that you are not allowed to import any solutions because you don't know what's inside them. If there's custom code inside, for example, or you can click to warn, then they will check a couple of things. The app checker, the app accessibility checker, and if there's custom code somewhere in some kind of modules or components, and gives out a warning to the maker. Like, watch out, here's custom code. If you don't trust the source, don't import that. The problem is now, if I am a maker and I import a solution and I get an error message, like a warning, there's custom code, then I usually don't know what to do. I imported it anyway, or don't import it because I get scared. So I'm not really sure if the solution checker is that handy right now. If there are a little bit more settings, then maybe then I will see the value in there. You can build a solution checker yourself with PowerShell actually, but that's kind of tricky. But yeah, and there is this last feature that you get with managed environments, and that are the Power Platform pipelines. And this is basically the Power Platform inbuilt ALM tool for makers. This is not for administrators or IT pros or some. So every citizen developer is able to use pipelines now. In the back end, they use the Azure DevOps pipelines, so it works really, really well. And you can build pipelines for your maker so they can deploy their solution from dev to test to prod. It's kind of easy. The downside is, and this is the downside with the whole managed environments, as soon as you turn on managed for an environment, every user that uses those environments need a premium license. And this is why most of my customers says, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. So this is a downside. Even with pipelines, at least the hosting environment, the target environment needs to be a managed environment. So all those features you only get if every user uses premium. But the good side is at least limit sharing, usage insights, and pipelines. You can build them yourself if you want to with the COE Starter Kit. And the COE Starter Kit also got the ALM accelerator. That works really nice, but that requires premium license as well, doesn't it? Oh, not sure. But yeah, Still, managed environments are becoming a good feature, and they're getting better and better because the Parquet team puts a lot of efforts and new features into those. So I'm afraid Microsoft is going in that direction, like they really want to push the premium license usage, which is understandable because they have to live from somewhat. They're not too rich. Anyway, managed environments will become more and more features, or will get more and more features in the future. So maybe have an eye out for that. But the important part with monitoring is actually use the functionality that you have, that you can use, and know why. And this is usually the part where I get into a lot of discussions with my customers. They always say we want to monitor and we gather all this data. And then I ask, okay, why? What are you going to do with that data? And then is a long silence. Hoarding the data is kind of nice if you can, but it's kind of pointless if you don't know what to do with it. There are several good reasons to monitor the Power Platform, like usage pattern or optimize performance, managing cost, obviously, or improve the security. There are many good reasons, but that is the first thing that you should be aware of. Why are you monitoring? What kind of data do you need for what reason? And then it's usually way more easy to determine which kind of usage or monitoring usage you want to use in the end or go for. I saw somebody raising a hand, and I would like to get back to that later as soon as I'm done. I just have 2 more topics and then I'm done. So next one is the default environment. The default environment should be monitored all the time, I would say, because the thing is, every user has access. And when apps in flow become important or even business critical, I mentioned that earlier, you want to have a backup. And in default, there is no backup. And there is no control over how somebody uses those apps and how this app is shared. And this is kind of, well, I don't have important apps on default ever, and none of my customers have. Additionally, none of my customers have the HTTP connector in default environment because the HTTP connector uses an open endpoint. And if you have somebody who's a little bit familiar around tech and the IT world, then it's easy to use it in an unsafe way. So what usually is happening, I'm building a flow right now, and I'm actually providing that as a flow sample in the next couple of days to monitor your default environment and to filter for certain connectors like Dataverse, HTTP, whatever you have there, to just set up a notification for yourself that somebody is using that, and then an automated notification goes out to please don't do that only in your dev environment or in another environment that we have for citizen development. Personal productivity should be around default should be around personal productivity. And from my point of view, as soon as I use the HTTP connector, then it can be personal productivity, but then it's mostly for using open APIs, and that's fun, but doesn't have to be on default. It can be on any other environment as well. So I keep that monitored very strictly, actually, because it's super difficult to get user away from default. Microsoft is really pushing. There are I've seen a few attempts actually to restrict the access to the default environment, at least in terms of Dataverse or Power Platform. But since we can't block the Dataverse connector and we can't edit the security roles, at least not through the user interface in default, and Microsoft is resetting the default environment occasionally, not on a clear pattern, but every now and then. And every customization that you may have done in the backend to the default environment gets resetted as well. So it's super tricky to get a clean default environment that is purely for personal productivity. But as I said, right now I'm developing and I'm preparing the flow that I'm using for all of my customers basically to put out there in the community as a flow sample, because this is really important and not that difficult to do. So you can keep you a little bit of work and just provide it for you. And now we come to the forbidden topic, the most important topic, and this is of course documentation. Everyone loves to read good documentation, but no one wants to write documentation. But it's very important because somewhere on the internet I read that every time you can't show your documentation to anyone, a kitten dies. And I've seen this on the internet, so this must be true. I think I don't have to talk too much about documentation because it is super important. I spend half of my days in the Microsoft Docs actually, and usually when I start a new governance project with my customers, I ask, okay, cool, let's see your documentation, then I can see what you've already set up, and then we can start. And then it's like, well, we have a governance concept, yes. Maybe we haven't written it down yet, and this is always the same, and this sucks. So write documentation, and actually, I set up a GitHub repository for the European Power Platform conference that just happened 2 weeks ago, and I put my governance document in there, like an example document with just all the headlines that you can download and use and fill it up. And there are all the headlines so that you don't forget any important topic. Maybe I can share the link later. It's not in here yet, I guess. Yeah, but this is kind of handy. And then I've just a few documentation, and that is use the Center of Excellence, for God's sake. This is so good, and it's basically for free. It just costs like 1 premium license a month. And I see I can hardly read that link, but this is the download link to the GitHub repository, and this is the link to the documentation. And another thing that I really like to add at the end is get your users trained, because as an administrator, the best security line is a trained user. And I know it's not the job of the administrator to provide trainings, but maybe to poke the people whose job that is, because trained users or untrained users are making the most mess, and it's horrible. So user training is really, really, really important. Okay, that was quite quick. So here's a little summary. What I've covered so far. So the tenant settings, self-service tenant isolation, DLPs with a tenant-wide DLP, and block the new connectors or put them in non-business or whatever group you're using, but per default. Then always start with the admin environment and then add up additional environments for important solutions, for business areas, for countries, for whatever you need them, but use security groups on them. That's very important. Monitor your Power Platform usage and your users. Keep an eye on your default environment, and please write documentation, because especially from the documentation, and if you have a good governance concept, there come a few good things, and that is consistency, security, compliance, scalability, collaboration, cost savings. This is usually the why. When I approach customer or when they approach me for governance projects, I start with the why. Why would we go for governance at all? And I always get them at cost savings. But since this is a session about basically the bare minimum, I start with the what and not with why. And I think, yes, governance is more than just security. I should click more and talk less, I think. And that's it for today. So thank you very much. And I think I have somewhere a slide with, no, I don't. I forgot to add this last slide with a QR code where you can like get to the repository that I mentioned earlier, as well to my GitHub repository where you have all those downloads and all those links. I have to add that later, or maybe in the chat, or I don't know what possibilities we have. Sarah, that's maybe
I'll follow
your
up
job.
on that for you. Yeah, I'll have the attendance report so everyone can get that content.
Cool. Okay, that was almost an hour. I'm so sorry. I wanted to be finished earlier. Yeah, so questions, comments? Go ahead.
Hey, Michael. Thanks for that. It's brilliant. When you say managed environments and you said there's a premium license, I just want to dig into what that license is that people need.
It's any kind of standalone license. So Power Automate per user, Power Automate per user, and Power App per user,
I know they're a mouthful.
Yeah. But those premium standalone license. An app pass is not sufficient. A trial license is not sufficient. The seeded M365 license is not sufficient. So you need basically the what is it? The $7 Power Automate and the $20 Power Apps. One of those. One is enough.
Awesome.
But
Thank you.
still, yeah, welcome.
Question for me, if that's all right. Good presentation, loved it. I'm going to go right back to the beginning. You're talking about self-service.
Yeah.
Something I completely forgot about, and I'm glad you jogged my memory because it's quite important. When they add new self-service capabilities for new products in M365, do you still have to go and manually monitor for anything new that might pop up, so you've got to shut it down? Or can you just run your full script every day just to automatically pick up anything new?
That's a good question. I never thought about that.
Because
But yes, well,
they'll still sneak a few in, and if you miss the blog post at the wrong time, you're not going to capture them,
yes.
are you? So how can we potentially just? I'm sure a lot of customers will work with that will want to see that and go, no, we don't want that. We want to try and switch off anything new that kind of not just Power
Yeah,
Platform, it'll be something else that they want to shut off, right?
that makes so much sense. Especially we have Viva Learning in here, and that's quite new, so that makes sense. I don't know. I would guess. Let me check. I don't know. I have to check. Just to be safe, I would run it like every week or every month.
Yeah, do it on a time, some kind of schedule in Logic apps or something. Just go and run it every week.
And that's even difficult to test because we would need to know when a new product, self-service purchase product is enabled, and then we can see if it's still enabled if we set all to disabled. Yeah, but yeah, that's a good point actually. I need to write that down
I think
somewhere.
when self-service came along, what, 2-3 years ago, there's only like 2 options. I've completely forgotten about it. And when you showed me that list there, there's like into double figures now. I was like, oh, that's grown quite a lot. And obviously they want people to spend money. I kind of understand it. But that is a big nightmare for large organizations who kind of want to have an understanding of what's going on. So I'd imagine they're going to add more. Like you just said, Viva sticks out like a sore thumb is probably the one they're going to do next, isn't it? Because that's the next big thing. So yeah. I don't want to have to manually check for that every single day. I'm sure our customers don't want to do that either.
Well, that sounds like an SLA contract that could work, but no, I won't do that. No, yeah, that's a good point. I would need to look into that and maybe ask. Maybe they have an idea, but I'm afraid they would say no.
Yes.
We will see. I can check.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yeah, Eric.
Hello, thanks for your presentation. I was wondering about on your take on using Azure dynamic groups for handling environments. This way you can perhaps use those 365 groups to aggregate multiple solutions. So what's your take on using, have you any practical testing on using that for Power Platform environments?
Can you come again? What's my take on?
What do you think about using Azure dynamic groups for handling security for environments?
I use Azure Dynamics groups sometimes for automating the whole onboarding process. I'm not too familiar with those, I have to say, so I'm not really sure. Are they basically groups as MS groups as we know it? No, right?
I was thinking about, let's say you have a common production environment, and there are, let's say, 10 apps that belongs in that production environment.
Yeah.
Instead of handling all those groups, you need a top group, which would be an Azure AD group with dynamic groups for all those 10 apps. That way, it would be perhaps easier to first give them access to the environment. Second, then you can handle security individually for those apps again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have to look into that. That is something that's still on my list for this one of those rainy autumn days. But dynamic group membership in general is a pretty cool idea to like assign licenses as well. And when they work with the traditional groups and traditional environments as well, that would be really cool actually. Haven't tried it yet.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just to say it's really handy on security roles. You can attach teams to dynamic Azure groups as well, which is quite fun. I've never tried it to a whole environment though, so that's a nice one to take away.
Yeah, I use those teams to add the security roles to environments, basically automatically, so that I don't have to do that. Yeah. Huh.
Are we good? Is there any more questions before we wrap up? Awesome. That was
If
great,
you have still any
Michael.
questions, just find me on social media and ping me. I try to answer, and if I don't know the answer, I'm honest enough to say, I don't know, but let's find out. That's usually how it works.
I'll get all the links from you, and I can send it out to everybody that's attended today. The recording will be available on the events page tomorrow at some point. I know I've been asked for the recording by a lot of people that couldn't make it, so I'll be sharing that link as well.
Awesome.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Thank you,
very much.
Michael.
Cheers,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.